Welcome, villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I'm your guide, All Kage, the creator and author of all the what-if stories you see on this channel, with your awesome suggestions, of course. I write, edit, and produce every story you hear, so if you're wondering who made it, it's me. I hope you enjoy today's video. Be sure to leave your what-if ideas in the comments and subscribe if you're new. Today's story is, What If Naruto Was in Adventure Time, Part 2. If you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon, link in the description. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this what if. Part 2, New Lifestyle. The wind began its quiet whisper, brushing through grass and rattling leaves, weaving a soft symphony of sounds that filled the air with gentle grace. It drifted into a small park, where figures rested in the calm, one man, surrounded by 9 small creatures. They sat together in stillness, a quiet family basking in one another's company. The man was blonde, dressed in a black and orange shinobi jumpsuit, a look that seemed almost iconic, as though it belonged to him and him alone. The animals around him were strange yet familiar, each distinct from the other: a fox, a bull, a bee, a slug, a horse, an ape, a crab, a black cat, and a tanuki. They appeared no larger than pets. But something deeper radiated from them, an unseen weight that lingered in the air. The man didn't notice, or perhaps, he chose not to. Here, he was content, surrounded by his family, peaceful, perfect. But peace never lasts. With a sudden crack of blue, lightning tore through the scene, the thunder that followed shattering the stillness. Bright streaks of light blinded him, the world convulsing, and in the next instant, the park was gone. He now stood in a forest, its trees painted crimson. His family, once so full of life, now lay silent at his feet, their small bodies broken, their warmth gone. The peace was dead. Shadows stretched long between the blood-colored trees. And at their heart stood a figure. Eyes like burning coals cut through the darkness, red, sharp, merciless. The man staggered back, his breath ragged. He looked down again, the bodies of his family weren't still after all. One by one, their small, broken forms began to dissolve into flickers of light. Fox, bull, bee, slug, horse, ape, crab, cat, tanuki, each glowing shard drifted toward him, sinking into his chest with a warmth that twisted to fire. The man who had smiled moments ago was gone. His body shifted, his aura flaring with an unbearable intensity, power spilling out of him like wildfire. The red-eyed figure didn't move. It only watched. And then, the man was on him. When his senses returned, his arm was thrust through the figure's chest, blood spraying across the crimson trees. All around him, the ground was littered with corpses, shinobi from every corner of his past, their faces locked in lifeless silence. The man stood among them, chest heaving, his hand shaking as it dripped with blood. His breath tore ragged through the quiet, until the silence itself began to collapse. The world buckled, folding in on itself, swallowing the bodies, the forest, even the red eyes, and he woke. "How do we get him down from there?" came a familiar voice. "I say we just leave him up there, it's not like we'd be missing anything," said another. "That's not very nice. He only moved in a few days ago." "Yes, and while I'll admit he's not that bad, I'd still prefer my peace until our blonde trickster wakes from his beauty sleep." Those were the first words Naruto heard before his senses stirred. The low conversation carried on, but it only served to pull him deeper into awareness. Then, without warning, he jolted awake, eyes wide, a raw shout tearing from his throat as scraps of his nightmare clung to him. His body tensed, chakra still flowing where it had kept him plastered to the ceiling all night. He hadn't felt like taking the couch again, so in his sleepy logic, the rafters were the next best thing. Now, though, his clever idea betrayed him. Gravity reclaimed him with merciless speed. His orange cloak fluttered wildly as he crashed down, slamming chest first into the wooden floor. Naruto groaned, not from pain exactly, he could handle pain, but from the sheer surprise of it. The dream always left him rattled, no matter how many times it came. He knew what it meant, knew what memory it echoed, but facing it directly would mean reliving it. And that, he wasn't ready for. Shaking the thoughts away, he blinked back to the present, replaying the sound of his fall in his head. The thud had been heavy, too heavy, he hadn't just landed on wood. A grin tugged at his lips. Sure enough, when he sat up, Jake was pancaked flat beneath him while Finn crouched nearby. Wide-eyed. Yep, just like I thought, Naruto muttered, and then burst into a storm of laughter. He clutched his stomach, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. Man, I didn't mean to break my fall on you, Jake, but this is even better than I imagined. Jake's flattened form groaned, see, I told you we should have left him alone. His words were muffled, directed more at Finn than Naruto. Finn rubbed the back of his neck, sheepish. Well, maybe, but he's our guest, would have been weird to let him miss breakfast. Jake grumbled something inaudible, then stretched and popped back to normal, glaring with sleepy annoyance. Naruto smirked, brushing himself off, my bad, didn't expect to fall, usually doesn't happen. Guess I'm a little rusty after only few days of being up. Jake's frown softened but didn't disappear entirely, just, make sure it doesn't happen again. Sure thing, Naruto said with a lazy salute. Jake shook his head and padded off toward the kitchen, leaving Naruto chuckling to himself. In the days since he first woke up, after who knew how many years, Naruto had ended up living with Finn and Jake. Not that he needed a home, but somehow it just happened. They'd been quick to take him in, mostly because he was fun, unpredictable, and just the right kind of trouble. Jake, of course, had been skeptical at first. The blonde was loud, mischievous, and far too comfortable making himself at home in someone else's treehouse. But after a few days of adventuring together, Jake had to admit, grudgingly, that Naruto wasn't half bad. He was quick on his feet, reliable in a fight, and always ready to back Finn up without hesitation, that earned points in Jake's book. Still, Naruto had a knack for getting under his skin. Mostly because Jake had become the #1 target of his pranks. Stretchy limbs tied in knots while he napped, his coffee swapped with syrup, his tail used as a swing without warning. And while Finn laughed so hard he nearly cried every time, Jake usually ended up grumbling, swearing under his breath, and muttering about blonde troublemakers. The truth was, though Jake wouldn't say it out loud, he'd warmed up to Naruto quickly. The guy was like an annoying little brother, chaotic, but dependable when it mattered. Naruto, for his part, pretended not to notice. But there was another reason he stayed, one he kept buried deep. Finn reminded him of his past, of his sons. It was uncanny, like many of his boys' spirits had been stitched together into this one kid. Impulsive. Kind, brave, a warrior with a heart too big for his own good. Naruto had outlived his children, and now here was Finn, one of the only humans left in OOO, if Princess Bubblegum and Marceline were right, standing as a living echo of what Naruto had once had, the good parts, anyway. In the meantime, he kept himself busy, adventures with Finn and Jake. Pranking the Candy Kingdom citizens, Bubblegum hated it, but he swore deep down she was at least a little impressed. Pranking the Ice King was even better, helping save princesses when Finn got that sparkle in his eye. And exploring this bizarre, beautiful world, where ruins of the old mixed with things stranger than dreams. OOO wasn't weak by any means, there were powers here that stood close to his, some strange, some terrifying. But no one yet on his level. If he wanted a real fight, it would have to be someone who could break a planet, or bend reality itself. Still, the battles he did find had a thrill of their own, he didn't need equals to enjoy a good brawl. For the first time in years, he even felt like training again. Way better than the stagnant, peaceful world the shinobi era had left behind. This place was unpredictable. Wild, a perfect playground for adventure and pranks. The thought made him chuckle, almost on cue. The sizzling sound of Jake's pan snapped through the kitchen. In a flash of fire and oil, the skillet burst skyward with a whoosh, flipping end over end before embedding itself in the wooden ceiling with a sharp thunk. It stuck there at an angle, smoke curling down like lazy ribbons. Naruto barked out a laugh, hands on his knees. Guess I'm not the only one who likes hanging around up there. Jake's eyes narrowed at the pan stuck in the ceiling. Smoke curling down. He turned to Naruto, who was already grinning like a fox caught red-handed. "You didn't do that, did you?" Jake asked, voice flat but heavy with suspicion. Naruto only tilted his head, lips twitching upward. He didn't need to deny it, the smirk said everything. "Do you really have to ask?" he teased, drawing the moment out like he was savoring it. Jake sighed, stretching his arm high to pluck the pan free. His shoulders sagged, muttering something about breakfast being ruined. Naruto chuckled to himself, folding his arms behind his head. Great, another day of fun. And that fun came at Jake's expense. The treehouse soon became Naruto's playground. Jake awoke from a nap to find his legs knotted together like rope. Naruto sitting nearby whistling as if he hadn't noticed. Later, Jake poured himself water only for the cup to explode into bubbles that clung to his fur, leaving him sputtering while Naruto laughed from the rafters. His favorite pillow was somehow plastered against the ceiling. The strings of his viola, twisted into a tangled nightmare. With each prank, Jake's grumbles grew louder, his patience thinner. His fur bristled, his tail lashed, his eyes narrowed harder and harder at the blonde every time he appeared, smug as ever. Finn found it hilarious. Half the time he laughed until his sides hurt, but Jake wasn't laughing. By midday his mutters had turned to sharp sighs, then growls under his breath. Naruto would vanish just before Jake snapped at him, slipping behind a wall or vanishing in a puff of chakra smoke, always leaving Jake fuming. By evening, Jake's jaw was tight, his fists curled. He wasn't about to blow, but he was close. The kind of close where the next prank could tip him over. And Naruto, he could see it, he knew it, but that sly grin never left his face. Finn and Jake sat across from each other in the living room, plates from lunch still sitting off to the side. Finn was polishing his sword, humming to himself, while Jake slouched against the couch, looking worn. His fur seemed puffed from irritation rather than sleep. "Man," Jake muttered, "I don't know how much more of this I can take. Don't get me wrong, Naruto's cool and all, but if I gotta spend one more day getting knotted up, slimed, or dropped on from the ceiling, I'm gonna lose it." Finn gave a half-laugh, trying to lighten things. "Come on, dude, you gotta admit, sometimes it's pretty funny." Jake's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, funny for you. Not so funny when it's my tail in the freezer, or when I wake up with whipped cream on my face. I can't relax Finn, he's always waiting for me to slip up." Naruto had been listening from the rafters, chakra keeping him balanced upside down like a spider. Their words reached him, and instead of guilt, at first he felt the smirk tug at his lips. "Are you serious? It's just a few pranks. They're acting like I'm ruining their lives." He decided to prove his point, one last prank. With a flick of chakra, Jake's mug, filled freshly with steaming tea, lifted from the table, floated silently into the air, then tilted. The next second, the hot liquid poured neatly down Jake's back. Jake yelped, leaping up and shaking himself like a wet dog, fur sticking in patches. "Aw! Are you kidding me?" He spun around, eyes flashing to the ceiling where Naruto hung like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Gotcha," Naruto chuckled, dropping down lightly, landing on his feet without a sound. His grin was wide, shameless. But Jake didn't shout, he didn't stretch at him or tackle him. Knowing that wouldn't end well. Instead, he took a deep breath, his eyes heavy, his shoulders sagging. He looked Naruto straight in the eye and spoke low, almost too calm, "Enough." Naruto's grin faltered for just a heartbeat, he wasn't used to calm. Anger, sure, retaliation, definitely, but calm, that was different. "I'm asking you respectful like," Jake said. "Stop, I can't handle it anymore man, you're a guest here, this is our home, please, just stop with the pranks." Naruto tilted his head, the old fire sparking again. He crossed his arms, smirk sharpening. "Ah, come on, they're fine, you survived didn't you?" Jake's jaw tightened, patience breaking. His voice rose, his tail snapping behind him. "No, they're not fine, I want you to stop, you're not part of this house, Naruto, you're just a guest. And right now, you're wearing out your welcome. Naruto snorted, the sound sharp. And what, you think you can stop me if I don't? His tone was teasing, but there was an edge under it, an instinct, the kind that came from a man who'd fought gods and monsters. Guys, hey, calm down. Finn jumped in between them, hands raised, looking from Jake's glare to Naruto's smirk. No need to go nuclear over a couple jokes. But Naruto wasn't looking at Finn, his eyes stayed locked on Jake's. And what he saw wasn't anger, not really, behind the frustration, the snapping temper. There was something else. Jake's eyes were tired, not just annoyed tired, worn tired, like he'd had enough, but was too drained to keep fighting it. That stopped Naruto cold, his smirk softened, slipping away. He's really done with this, huh? I didn't think it was that bad, guess I've been pushing it a little too much. Naruto let out a breath, scratching the back of his head. Fine, I'll stop, no more pranks, at least not as many as I'm doing now. Jake blinked, surprised by the shift, but stayed quiet. Maybe I took advantage of you guys letting me stay here, Naruto added, voice lighter, casual, but there was sincerity buried in there. He gave a short bow of his head. Sorry about that. Then the smirk crept back, not sharp this time, but warm. Still, you gotta admit, at least some of them were funny. Jake's frown didn't move, his silence was louder than anything he could have said. Naruto chuckled, yeah, that's fine. A pause, then he straightened, tugging at the edge of his cloak. Anyway, I've got something else I need to do, out of the house. He waved a hand lazily, already turning toward the door. I'll be back later, don't wait up. His tone was nonchalant, easygoing like always. But inside, there was that quiet pull, that old instinct of caring for people he barely knew, like it was etched into his bones. He wasn't gonna keep them up worrying, not Finn. Not Jake. The door closed softly behind him, and the treehouse was quiet again. Jake leaned back against the couch with his arms crossed, brows furrowed. You think I went a little too hard on him? Finn just shrugged, fiddling with his hat string. I dunno man, he seemed fine with it. You know Naruto, he just brushes stuff off. That didn't seem to ease Jake's worry, but he let it drop, muttering something under his breath as Finn wandered off toward the kitchen. Outside, the last traces of the sun dipped into the horizon, painting the sky in deep orange and fading purples. Naruto stood in the cooling air, hands shoved in his pockets, his smirk faltered for just a moment before he pressed his palms together in a few sharp hand signs. A gust of wind and flecks of white sand lifted him up, carrying him into the air as if on an invisible bed. He stretched out flat on his back, staring up at the sky with a lazy grin. Yeah, now this is the way to travel, he muttered to himself, letting the wind carry him along. Silence filled the air, but his thoughts refused to stay quiet. Guess I went a little too far with Jake, he admitted under his breath. Thought the pranks were harmless, but, tch, the guy looked exhausted. He blew air out of his nose, half amused, half annoyed with himself. I do get carried away sometimes, oh well, his grin crooked upward, but not all the way. Still, it's not like I meant any harm. Just wanted to keep things fun, he paused, eyes narrowing at the fading light above. But maybe, he can't take much more of it. That familiar weight crept into his chest, the kind he hated to acknowledge. Man, I hate this feeling, always slowing me down. His smirk came back sharp and playful. Fine then, if Jake's tapped out, I'll just find new people, fresh meat's always fun. He let himself drift sideways on the wind, gaze sliding back toward the distant forest. But, if I'm gonna keep bouncing around pranking people, maybe I should think about where I'm staying too, can't exactly keep mooching off a treehouse that ain't even mine. Naruto chuckled at the thought, folding his arms behind his head. Not like they ever gave me a room anyway, bound to get crowded sooner or later. Wouldn't be fair to them, or me. The grin brightened, his imagination running wild. Maybe I could make my own place. Something crazy, huge, filled with traps and gags, every step a surprise. He snickered, but, nah, living alone's boring. His tone softened, though the grin didn't leave. Better to have someone around, someone who could actually prank me back. Otherwise, it's just shooting fish in a barrel, and that gets old fast. He sighed, even Jake's already starting to bore me, and it's only been a few days, yeesh. The thought ended abruptly when his forehead smacked into something solid. Ow, damn it, Naruto rubbed his head, blinking up at the massive yellow wall with white cream filler squished between layers. His mouth dropped, then curled into a grin. Did I just faceplant into a giant cake? He leaned back, hands on his hips. Wait, no, that's the Candy Kingdom. The white sand lowered him to the ground, and Naruto tilted his head, staring at the candy-coated fortress with a gleam in his eyes. Guess this is as good a place as any to stir things up, been a few days since I poked at Bubble Butt. He cracked his knuckles, smirk stretching wide. In a single bound, Naruto vaulted over the wall encircling the Candy Kingdom, landing atop the gumdrop-lined roof of a house. The surface was bouncy, sticky in places, but he stuck the landing with ease. Yeah, he'd have some fun with this, take the scenic route, mess with a few people on the way, the usual. His grin sharpened as he pressed a hand into a gumdrop for balance, crouched low, then bolted forward. He sprang to the next rooftop, then backflipped onto the glossy red curve of a candy cane rail. Sliding down, he should have gotten glued to the thing, but somehow he didn't, just kept his momentum until he flicked off the end, catching himself on a storm drain. From there, he paused just long enough to glance down at the candy citizens. Some strolled lazily across the sugar-paved streets, others shuffled in and out of shops. A few looked up and gawked, but most didn't even notice the blur overhead. Naruto launched himself again, bouncing from building to building. He twisted through the air, 3 sharp backflips before dropping into the street below. He hit the ground running, weaving between carts, leaping over startled gumdrop folk, ducking under a candy beast of burden before springing onto its back and vaulting off. The wind whipped through his hair, the rush never got old. He'd run this kingdom ragged once before, but this time he wasn't stumbling half-mad from waking up. This time he had control, instinct, and a perfect mental map of the place. Finally, with a laugh bubbling at his lips, Naruto decided to end his little race against himself. He bent his knees, chakra sparking through his body, and launched. He soared skyward like a cannonball, body cutting through the air before angling into a dive. Glass shattered as he ripped straight through a palace window, landing in a crouch with one hand braced against the polished floor, the other flung wide for balance. Perfect landing, he muttered, smirk widening. The banana guard stiffened as he entered, standing straighter even though their weapons still shook. Princess Bubblegum's gaze swept over the cracked window, the scuffed tiles, then landed squarely on Naruto. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. Just folded her hands neatly in front of her. You could have requested an audience, she said, calm, regal. Naruto tilted his head, lips tugging into a sly grin. Yeah, but where's the fun in requesting? This way, I get the view, the run, and the landing, triple win. PB's expression barely shifted, but he caught the faintest exhale through her nose. Annoyed, maybe, trying not to show it. I see, she said. Well, since you're here, perhaps your energy can be put to use. I have projects that could benefit from an extra hand. Naruto leaned back against the chair he'd dropped into, stretching his arms lazily over the top. Projects, huh? That's a fancy way of saying work. And I didn't come here looking for a job. I was bored. Thought you might have something entertaining. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction, a flicker of thought behind them, before she smoothed it over with a practiced smile. Helping me could be entertaining. If you're creative enough. Naruto chuckled under his breath, tapping the armrest with his fingers. That's slick, princess, kinda what I expected after you questioned me for a bit. Makes me think you're the type of person to want to always be thinking a step ahead. His grin widened, teeth flashing. But I'm not really the step-in-line type, not your soldier, not your subject, definitely not your tool. He watched her face carefully, no cracks, just that same polite, steady calm. But he swore she'd paused earlier, like she'd been weighing her words. Maybe thinking of ways to box him in. The thought drifted out of his mind just as quickly as it came. He wasn't here to think too hard, he just wanted to see how far he could poke the princess before she snapped. So far, she hadn't, which made the game all the more fun. Naruto leaned back in the chair, balancing it on two legs while his grin stretched wide. So, what if I don't feel like doing your boring work, you gonna lock me up again? PB didn't bite. Her hands folded neatly behind her back. What if I were to make them interesting? That caught him, his eyes narrowed just a little, smirk quirking into something sharper. Oh, interesting, you say, how interesting, princess? Because my bar is pretty high, you'll have to get real creative. Her gaze flicked, cool and calculating, depends what you consider interesting. Naruto tapped his chin dramatically. Well, you could always ask me to test how fast I can make your castle guards cry. Or maybe you need a royal taste tester, just, only for the candy people that look particularly edible. He leaned forward, eyes glinting. Or, maybe you need a brave volunteer to warm your royal bed. For the first time, her mask cracked, just a flicker, a tightening around her mouth, a sharp look that told him she'd heard enough. She smoothed it away quickly. But Naruto caught it, oh, he definitely caught it, and he loved getting a reaction out of her, so far, better than Jake. He laughed, gotcha, for a second, you almost looked like a person and not just some princess made of rules. PB exhaled slowly, as though dismissing his games. When you first woke up, she said, pointedly shifting the conversation, I asked you if you knew about an energy spike. It was detected directly below your grounds, it hasn't been identified yet. Naruto tilted his head, woke up, that was, what, a few days ago, he grinned. Feels like forever already. Her eyes sharpened, it wasn't yours, your second time in the castle, we scanned you, the signature from the spike doesn't match you. Naruto's grin faltered, just slightly, so when you asked me about it before, it wasn't because you thought it was mine. You just wanted to see if I knew anything about it. PB inclined her head, correct, but after witnessing the display of your own energy, I began to wonder if there might be a connection, perhaps a resonance of some kind. She tapped a tablet she'd been carrying, its candy-colored screen flickering. To test this, I'll need you to exert yourself, physically, enough that we can gather some data. Naruto leaned back again, thoughtful this time. His grin was still there, but softer, hiding the edge of something sharper beneath it. That surge, he had felt it. Like a hand shaking him awake, could be the whole reason he was here. Physically taxing, he muttered, more to himself than to her, then his grin sharpened again. If you really think you can wear me out, princess, I'd say that sounds like fun, been itching to stretch my legs anyway. PB gave the smallest nod, already cataloging something in her head. Naruto chuckled low, eyes glinting, though if this is really about testing me, then the first test ought to be something a little more private, just for science, of course. Her glare this time was less controlled, sharp as a knife. Naruto only laughed harder, rocking the chair back on two legs until it almost tipped. After that, the two made their way deeper into the castle. The blonde trailed just a step behind the princess, hands in his pockets, grin lazy. He smirked at the view in front of him, chin propped in his hand like he was admiring fine art. Every time they passed through a door, turned a corner, or slipped by a few candy guards, it looked like he wasn't paying attention at all. And that's exactly how Naruto liked it. On the surface, he was all grin and distraction, eyes glued to one particular feature. But underneath, he was mapping every hall, every guard post, every twist in the candy-coated maze of a castle. It was second nature. Sure, he was a little distracted, okay, very distracted. But hey, a guy had priorities. Assets needed to be assessed, and sometimes assets were just really big. Naruto smothered a chuckle to himself, he wasn't going to defend that one. He just liked big asses, and so what, no one could blame him. His thoughts finally cut off when they stepped into a new chamber. The room was starkly different from the rest of the castle, white tiles, harsh bright lights, walls and tables stripped of candy frills. This wasn't some royal sitting room, it was clean, precise, cold. An actual lab. Rows of burners, glass tubes bubbling with colorful liquids, preserved creatures sealed in jars. Whole sections were divided off for different experiments: biology, chemistry, things he couldn't even name. Naruto's smirk slipped into something else, curiosity flickered. Before, he'd written her off as some prim, proper princess type, bound to rules, forced to act royal, and fun to poke at just to watch her squirm. But this was different. This was a woman with her hands in everything. A mind that pulled apart the world piece by piece just to see what made it tick. It wasn't just Princess Bubblegum anymore. To Naruto, this looked a lot more like a mad scientist. And it suddenly made her sharp questions and analytical way of talking click into place. PB wasted no time once they were in the lab. She crossed to one of the long tables, swiping a tray of instruments aside and setting down a clipboard in their place. Her voice carried that same smooth, formal tone, diplomatic, but already edged with curiosity. First, I want to establish a baseline. From my observation of your fight with the Ice King, it was clear your energy can do many things. I need to understand its range. Naruto leaned lazily against the nearest counter, arms folded, smirk playing on his lips. Oh, you were watching me that closely, kinda flattering bubble butt. Her jaw twitched, but she ignored the name. Observation is part of leadership. I saw enough to know it's versatile, but not how. He chuckled, scratching his cheek. Well, you're not wrong. You saw me throw a few tricks around, but chakra can do a lot more than that. Pretty much anything if you've got the know-how, finesse, and a bit of imagination. Her brows arched, quill already scratching across her clipboard. Anything? Yup, elements, illusions, stuff that messes with your body, boosts your strength, heals, whatever you dream up. It's like having a toolbox with no bottom. He grinned wider. Not that I'm gonna dump the whole thing out for you today. I don't have the time, or the patience to give lectures. Then let's narrow it down, she said quickly, adjusting her glasses. That day, you displayed two distinct techniques. The first was the shroud of black energy. The second was the method you used to, her lips pressed thin, disable the Ice King. Naruto's grin turned sharp. Oh, you mean the harem jutsu. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. I am not calling it that. He barked a laugh, delighted at the crack in her mask. What, you don't like the name? I thought it had a nice ring to it. There is nothing scientific about that technique. Sure there is, I already explained everything when I sent ice pops flying, nothing more to it. Well, he smirked, leaning closer across the table, that and the fact it's technically two jutsu in one. She looked like she wanted to press further but caught herself, lowering her quill. Naruto tilted his head. So, is this what I was promised? A bunch of questions, 'cause if you tricked me, that's not very nice. Might mean I'll have to pay you back, maybe some quality alone time, just the two of us. Princess Bubblegum's nose wrinkled ever so slightly, her lips pressing together as though physically holding back a comment. Finally, she exhaled through her nose and muttered, "Stop being immature." Naruto just grinned wider. He liked that he could make her crack like that. She steadied herself, slipping back into the smooth, professional tone. I only had a few questions to clarify before we begin. Now, about that shroud, what exactly was it? Oh that, Naruto shrugged. I just call it shadow. Since my chakra's black, it makes sense, simple name for a simple thing. Simple, her eyes flicked up at him sharply. From what I observed, it appeared to act independently from you. You're not wrong, his voice was casual, but his gaze drifted to the side. It's sentient, to a point. Basically, my energy has its own thoughts, doesn't always match mine. Bubblegum froze mid-note, pencil hovering over the page. Her eyes lifted, searching his expression for something more, but Naruto only looked bored, his grin faint and unreadable. He gave a low whistle, then leaned back with that same careless swagger. But hey, don't overthink it. Energy that talks back is just part of my charm. The princess frowned, gaze narrowing again, but Naruto was already moving on, lips quirking into another smirk. So what, you want me to pull it out for you? Her shoulders straightened, hands folding neatly behind her back as if bracing herself. Yes. That would be the next step. Naruto clicked his tongue, eyes dancing with mischief. Sorry, I don't usually do that until at least the third date. But. He leaned forward, grin sharp as a blade. I guess for you, princess, I could make an exception. For the briefest second, the corner of her mouth twitched, whether it was a smirk or the start of a grimace, Naruto couldn't tell. But she smoothed it out in an instant, clipboard tucked tighter to her chest like a shield. And that little flicker? That was all he needed to know she wasn't as unshakable as she pretended. Princess Bubblegum pinched the bridge of her nose, exhaling through her teeth. This is just taking me in circles. You're reminding me of the first time I tried questioning you. Naruto chuckled, tilting his head at her. Oh, you mean you finally noticed? Her eyes snapped to him. You're doing this on purpose. He only shrugged, all lazy indifference. Maybe, maybe not. The princess stared at him, quill twitching in her fingers like she wanted to jab it into his forehead. Then, with a heavy sigh, she set her clipboard on the counter. Fine, maybe we should just begin the physical tests. I'll figure things out myself through data. Naruto smirked, rocking back on his heels. Heh, guess you're finally giving up on the whole question and answer thing. Probably for the best. Never was good at sitting still for pop quizzes. She ignored him, moving briskly across the lab to power up one of her machines. The whir of gears and the hum of crystals filled the air. Still, Naruto couldn't resist leaning on the counter with a curious grin. So what kind of test are we talking about, exactly? Something fun, something dangerous? Don't tell me you're just gonna stick me with needles. Your cooperation will determine the methodology, she said, voice clipped. Oh, vague. I like it, build suspense. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't take the bait this time. Instead, she adjusted the knobs and glanced over. We'll begin with another scan of your chakra. She tested the word slowly, like it was a foreign candy on her tongue. I want to compare the readings between you and this shadow. At that, Naruto's grin widened. Heh, you really want to meet him, huh? Meet isn't the word I'd use, but yes, I want to see if the shadow's composition differs from yours. The air around Naruto shimmered, dark wisps creeping out from his skin like smoke, curling into jagged, grasping shapes before snapping back into place. In a blink, the black shroud burst into full view, swirling around him like a living cloak. The air seemed to thicken, hum low and unnatural. PB stiffened, clipboard pressed instinctively against her chest. Her eyes darted over the readings flashing across her machines, but for a second she couldn't hide the unease prickling her expression. Naruto noticed, and of course he couldn't resist. What's the matter, princess? Thought you liked experiments. Don't tell me you're scared of my shadow. I'm not scared, she said too quickly, eyes fixed on the scanner. I'm cautious. He chuckled, shifting so the black aura flickered closer to her side of the room before reeling it back. Fair enough. For a moment, silence hung, broken only by the hum of machines. Then Naruto tilted his head, regarding her with a lazy but sharp curiosity. Hey, Bubble Butt. Why are you always so formal with me? You ask a lot of questions, but you don't really give many answers. Kinda like you're hiding behind all that diplomacy. Her grip on the clipboard tightened. You never asked me that before. Sure I did, Naruto smirked. Or maybe I just implied it the first time you tried grilling me. You didn't answer then, either. Her lips pressed thin, eyes flicking to the shadow and back to him. Some questions are irrelevant to the data. He shrugged, leaning back, hands laced behind his head while the shadow curled lazily around him. Guess I'll just have to keep poking until you do answer. 'Cause I think you're more fun when you crack a little. For a brief instant, her mask faltered, her lips twitching like she was holding back a retort, but she smoothed it out, turning back to the machine. We're getting started now. Hold still. Sure, Naruto smirked, shadow swirling tighter around him. But I'm still counting this as a date, princess. The hum of the machine deepened as the scanner arms whirred around him, bathing the room in pale light. Shadow shifted against his skin like restless smoke, occasionally curling toward Princess Bubblegum before snapping back into place. She stood close to the controls, quill scratching notes, gaze flicking between the readings and him. Her voice was crisp, but her tone probed deeper than before. What exactly do you want from OOO? Naruto cocked his head, grin playing on his lips. What do I want? Yes, she pressed, eyes not leaving the numbers scrolling across the panel. And what are you going to do here? Do you intend to ally yourself with anyone? He barked a short laugh. Straight to the political stuff. You really don't waste time. I need clarity, she said, still scanning. Naruto rolled his eyes and leaned back, shadow slithering lazily. Do you always ask this many questions? 'Cause from where I'm standing, this is only the second time we've talked, and so far, it's been nothing but me annoying you and you interrogating me. Pretty sure even the viewers don't like it much. That made her pause. Slowly, she raised a single pink eyebrow. Viewers? Naruto smirked. Don't worry about it, sweet cheeks. Her lips pressed tight, but she scribbled another note instead of engaging. Still, Naruto leaned forward on his seat, grin sharpening. But don't you think it's boring, all this questioning? I mean, sure, knowledge is power, blah blah, but if you question everything all the time, when do you actually live? That one landed. For just a moment, her face slipped, the cool, measured mask falling away. Her gaze flicked to the scanner, then down to her quill, and she muttered, almost too low to catch, science is the only thing that's ever made sense to me. There's nothing else to it. Naruto blinked, watching the faint slump of her shoulders. Then, with a sigh, she pulled the mask right back on, straightening her back and tightening her expression. Now answer the questions. Naruto looked at her blankly, shadows flickering, tendrils brushing his chair. Nah. Her head tilted slightly. Nah. Nah, not interesting enough, he shrugged, smirk tugging at his lips. Besides, we still haven't gotten to those physical tests yet, have we? PB deadpanned, staring at him long enough that he thought she might throw the clipboard at his face. Instead, she exhaled and turned her focus back to the scanner. There's no difference in the energy signatures. No reason that I can detect why this shadow should be sentient. Shadow chose that moment to slip across the floor like smoke, curling around her legs and lifting up toward her shoulder, sniffing at her hair like a curious beast. PB froze, jaw tight, while Naruto leaned forward with an amused chuckle. Guess the machine doesn't know everything, maybe it's just a mystery princess. Something you should leave alone, instead of poking at. Her eyes cut sharply toward him, irritation flickering past the mask. That's not what that means. Mysteries are dangerous. The unknown may seem fun, but a mystery without an answer is just a problem waiting to happen. Naruto put a hand over his chest, gasping like he'd been wounded. Ouch, you wound me, Bubble Butt, didn't think you'd call me a problem to my face. Her stare was flat, unimpressed. Follow me, the tests you wanted are ready. As she turned briskly toward the next chamber, Naruto smirked slyly. Shadow slid back into his skin, the air lightening with its absence. He hopped down from the seat, then glanced straight at the camera, jabbing a thumb at PB's back as she marched ahead. See what I gotta deal with, he muttered with a grin before trailing after her. The day had blurred into a long string of experiments. First had been strength, Naruto effortlessly lifting weights that made her reinforced cranes groan. Then defenses, Shadow reacting before her sensors could even register the stimuli, shielding him in ways she couldn't fully predict. Chakra analysis yielded little more than frustration. The substance behaved like liquid fire in one test, a living storm in another. No two readings matched. Naruto, of course, loved every second of it. Every new challenge made his grin widen, his laugh grow louder, his body push harder. For Princess Bubblegum, it was something else entirely. Every test ended with her machines reaching thresholds they weren't built to cross. No clear limits, no neat equations, just numbers pushed past the safe range and readouts filled with question marks. Now he was inside her Euro treadmill, a spherical chamber she'd originally designed to throw unstable matter through controlled vectors, a safeguard project for the Candy Kingdom. The average Candy citizen never needed it above level 2, for Naruto, level 10 barely scratched the surface. The chamber spun him at speeds just below Mach 1. Centrifugal forces screaming at his body from every direction. Sweat streaked across his face as his hair whipped wildly, but instead of breaking down, he only hooped and shouted, laughing as if he'd been waiting years for something this wild. At least he's showing fatigue, PB thought, a touch of relief pulling at her lips. Speed, it seemed, wasn't his strongest attribute. Still far beyond what most beings in OO should manage, but, finally, something that kept him busy. Busy enough that she could think. How strong is he really? Why dodge my questions? What's his endgame? Her jaw tightened. She didn't like having to ask, she didn't like unknowns. He was chaos in human form, too loud. Too unpredictable, and far, far too powerful. Every time she pressed, he laughed her off, twisting her questions into jokes. She wanted to pin him down. To label him, ally or enemy, that was all she needed to sleep at night. Ready to come out yet? She called, trying to keep her voice light, diplomatic. Inside the spinning chamber, Naruto's voice rang out between laughs. No way, I'm just getting started, haven't had to run like this in, who even knows how long. Then he tumbled into a roll, rebounded to his feet, and sprinted forward again with manic joy. His laughter carried through the intercom until it was all she could hear. PB dropped her chin into her palm, staring at the monitors with a long sigh. It was like babysitting the world's most hyperactive child. A hyperactive child who happened to be superpowered, chaotic, and impossible to predict. And dangerous. She wouldn't say it aloud, not even to herself, but she wanted him defined. Enemy or ally, now, not tomorrow, not eventually, now, because until she knew, she would never stop glancing over her shoulder. She considered asking directly, just pinning him down with the blunt question. But she had already tried that not even a day ago. His answers could be anything, random and evasive, as inconsistent as his energy readings. Most likely, she needed subtlety, not grilling. Not pressure. Small, seemingly meaningless questions, scattered like breadcrumbs. She could map his answers later, fit them into the puzzle piece by piece. Her train of thought broke when the door hissed open. She jumped, startled, and turned. Naruto was standing behind her, grinning wide, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. What's next? He asked, stretching as Shadow slid lazily back into his form. PB forced her composure back into place, smoothing her lab coat as her surprise softened into a practiced smile. That's basically everything, though. There are a few things not directly related to the tests that I wanted to ask you. Immediately, his grin faltered, his eyes half-lidded in exaggerated boredom. They'll be quick, she added, forcing her voice gentle. Naruto leaned back on his heels, glancing past her toward the window where the sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. He tilted his head, as if listening. His gaze flicked to Shadow as it seeped briefly from his skin, curling like a snake toward his ear. He frowned, seriously, that's your reason? A pause, a low grumble, fine. He turned back to PB with a shrug, lacing his hands behind his head. Guess we can stay, even if your only reason's that you like the smell. Her eyes flicked between him and Shadow, trying not to reveal how much she wanted to pry at that. But before she could, he smirked again. All right, princess, ask away, but after this, I'm gone. The main lab was quieter than the testing chambers. The hum of instruments, the glow of screens, the faint sugar scent of the air circulators, it should have been comfortable. For bubblegum, it felt like sitting on the edge of a storm. She busied her hands with papers, recalibrating scanners that didn't need recalibrating, while Naruto slouched into one of her lab chairs like it belonged to him. Shadow oozed lazily over his shoulder, its eyes blinking in and out of shape as if mocking her. All right, she began, smoothing her voice into something diplomatic, almost casual. A few quick questions. Shoot. Naruto drawled, tipping his head back. So she started small. Did he like the Candy Kingdom? What did he think of the people here? Did he enjoy food, or art, or music? Each question simple, innocuous, softened by her best polite smile. He answered in the same half-distracted way he had during the first interrogation, teasing, flippant, turning her words into jokes. If she asked about art, he'd say his masterpiece was drawing mustaches on portraits. If she asked about food, he'd smirk and say he preferred stealing pies from shadows. But somewhere between her questions about where he traveled and what he found interesting, his answers slowed. His smirk stayed, but the sharpness behind his eyes made her throat tighten. He'd noticed. You know, princess, his voice carried a different weight now, still playful, but underpinned with something heavier. You really think I don't see what you're doing? Her lips parted, but she caught herself. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, grin curling with deliberate edge. You're fishing, trying to box me in, figure out where I stand, who I'll stand with, but I'll save you the trouble. PB's pulse ticked faster. I'm not allying with anyone. His words were simple, blunt, utterly unyielding. I went to sleep because the world got boring, no fun, no fights, just people with problems they wanted me to solve. He snorted, usually in secret. I stopped wars. Started a few too. I'm done with all that. If I help someone, it's only because I feel like it, because it's fun, or maybe I like or maybe, his smirk sharpened, out of the goodness of my heart. The lightness of his tone clashed violently with the weight of the truth in it. PB swallowed, realizing she'd been holding her breath. I woke up for fun, Naruto continued, sitting back in her chair like a king on his throne. And I'll have fun wherever I go, that's all. Enemy, her mind whispered, dangerous, untethered. Her mouth opened, but he raised his hand, silencing her. The grin returned, boyish but sharper than a blade. That's not to say I'll be attacking anyone for anyone either. Depends on my mood, sure, but this place, nah. He tilted his head, studying her with lazy amusement. You're too interesting, princess, too fun to poke at, and maybe to help poke at others, so relax, your kingdom's safe. The words should have calmed her, they didn't. Does that mean, she asked carefully, you'll stop pranking my citizens? She recalled the complaints, shadows with glowing eyes, sudden pies to the face, terrified candy people fainting from sheer fright. Naruto chuckled, standing with a stretch. Nope, I said you weren't in danger, didn't say I'd stop having fun. Before she could muster a retort, he was already waving her off. That answer your burning questions? No, she thought, not even close. It actually raised a few questions, like how was he able to read her so easily? But her voice betrayed her, slipping into a polite nod, for now. Good, his grin widened, all teeth and confidence. And hey, ask me for help anytime, your machines are fun, sorry about the ones I broke. Her eyes snapped wide, machines, she'd forgotten, completely, about the expensive, delicate, irreplaceable instruments shattered during testing. Her jaw dropped, ready to snap at him, but when she turned, the chair was empty, a faint breeze brushed her cheek, and one of the tall windows stood cracked and broken. PB closed her eyes, exhaling through her nose. He was still a blank, still an unknown. But at least she knew one thing, her kingdom wasn't under threat. The rest of OOO, though, she couldn't say the same. Naruto landed smack in the middle of one of the Candy Kingdom's darkened streets. He'd chosen it carefully, close enough to the exit for a quick getaway, far enough into shadow that no nosy candy citizen would spot him. At the thought, black chakra bubbled out of his skin, cloaking him in a restless shroud. It spilled into the shape of a tattered cloak at his back, making him grin as he started down the street. The candy-coated scenery didn't exist for him. As far as Naruto was concerned, it was just him and shadow here. The rest of the world was blank, tunnel vision closing in while his thoughts festered. You know, he muttered, the grin tugging wider, we should have messed with her a lot more. That sent him into a sharp, belly-deep laugh that echoed against the sugar walls. He could have dragged it out, the whole I'm not your pawn reveal. Threatened her, toyed with her pride, pushed her buttons until she cracked. He would have enjoyed that, part of him wanted to, but not with her, not yet. Too soon. The truth was, he already cared, not much, not deeply, but enough to notice. Bubblegum had the makings of someone he could actually have fun with, maybe even a friend. Potential, he reminded himself. Always potential. He connected to people too easily, and he'd paid for it before. Never again, no more blind sentiment. Still, it didn't matter, what mattered was the fun. He hoped the princess patched up those machines quickly, they were fun toys. Maybe she'd even make them tougher next time. Naruto's smile faltered, his eyes shifted toward the cloak at his back. What do you mean calm down? He asked, irritation prickling his voice. No reply. Shadow never really spoke, not in words. Naruto just knew, felt, understood in some gut-deep way, same as with Kurama all those years ago. Similar, but different. His eyes narrowed, fox-like. TCH, you're no fun, always so serious. Even back when you first showed up, you were all work, no play. The grin returned, sharp and glinting, his eyes gleamed like molten gold. Well, guess what, there's no work here, nothing that needs doing, just fun, endless, stupid fun. Another pause, Shadow pressed back, and Naruto's brow rose. What do you mean there's still work? His tone tilted lighter, almost mocking. I was listening, you know, maybe I'm a prankster, but I pay attention, makes the fun better. A beat, his grin twitched. So what if she picked up another energy signature near mine? Who cares, probably some weird thing we haven't run into yet. Silence pressed against him heavy, Naruto squinted. Fox eyes narrowing. Shadow's unspoken wait nod. Then he dismissed it with a laugh, shaking his head. Nah, if it was dangerous, we'd know, we've never seen anything stronger than the Otsutsuki, or us, stop being such a spoil sport. With that, he quickened his stride, ready to crash, nap until morning, then maybe check out another kingdom. But before the thought could settle, Shadow pressed one last wordless warning into his chest. And Naruto froze. Every muscle locked, like his body remembered danger before his mind caught up. The playful air that clung to him, mischief, laughter, the thrill of pranks, slipped away in an instant. For that heartbeat, he wasn't a trickster. He was a man on edge, a shinobi who'd lived too long watching for threats no one else could see. The silence pressed harder, colder, until it felt like even the sugar-coated air around him held its breath. His eyes narrowed, his shoulders stiffened, his heartbeat thudded heavier than it should have. Then, just as sudden, he loosened, shrugging the weight off with a lazy roll of his neck. A grin cracked back across his face, the golden glint in his eyes returning like a flame rekindled. See, that's the problem with you, he said, voice tilting sharp with humor. You drop little comments like that and make me look like some paranoid old man. He jabbed a thumb at his chest. Mocking, nothing to worry about, nothing at all, so stop spooking me with that cryptic garbage. The grin sharpened, almost daring, all it does is make you sound more like an ass. With that, he started walking again, cloak trailing behind him as if the moment of stillness had never happened. Naruto slipped out of the Candy Kingdom and into the open night, the moonlit grassland stretching wide before him. His hands folded lazily behind his head, the black chakra that had once been Shadow already melting back into his body. He wasn't interested in brooding, he was interested in home, a long nap, and maybe forgetting half the nonsense that had just gone down. The wind tried to whisper at him. Tell him of the surprise ahead, but he ignored it, eyes fixed on the horizon. Would you mind shutting the hell up? Naruto blurted suddenly, glaring at the void only he could see. When I'm this tired your voice gets unusually loud, and it gets on my nerves. Fine, I'll be quieter. Thanks. The voice never really stopped though, it always lingered, muttering at the edges of his mind, narrating his every step like some cosmic commentator. It wasn't Shadow, but something else. Naruto rolled his eyes at the thought, but couldn't help wondering what it meant this time, and then froze. His grin snapped back into place, sharp and full force, sweeping away the bored look he'd been wearing. With a single dash he appeared in front of the figure, making her jolt back in surprise before instinctively floating a few feet into the air. Hey Marceline, Naruto said smugly. Did I scare you? 'Cause if I did, that's already better than the way you tried to spook me the first time we met. Marceline blinked once, twice, then laughed, folding her arms with a sly smile, red eyes glinting in the dark. "You didn't scare me," she said. "Just surprised me." She gave him a look. "Wait, what are you doing out here, Blondie? Haven't seen you in a week, and now you just pop up in the middle of nowhere. I figured you'd be off going buck wild exploring. Didn't think you'd show up again until like a month passed." Naruto chuckled. Fair enough, he had meant to explore but so far he'd mostly just stuck close to Finn and Jake, tagging along on their chaos instead of making his own. Still, her question nudged something back at him. He cocked an eyebrow. "Actually, I could ask you the same thing. Didn't think you ever left your forest." Marceline snorted. "I was actually on my way to sneak into that treehouse over there. I know the guys who live in it, figured I'd mess with them a little." Naruto blinked, then glanced toward the treehouse he'd been crashing in, and back at her. Then he just lost it, laughing his ass off. What were the odds? Marceline was planning to prank Finn and Jake. The only problem was, she hadn't thought to invite him, and Jake could really use a break. Naruto froze at the thought, then scratched the back of his head. "Oh yeah, I did say I'd give him a break, man, I'm forgetful." He looked back at Marceline with a fox-like grin. "Didn't think you'd know Finn and Jake. Guess it's not impossible though, you're basically neighbors with how close your places are. But," he added, wagging a finger, "I can't really let you prank them, mainly Jake," promised him some peace. Marceline raised a brow. "You know Finn and Jake?" Naruto gave her a quick nod. "Well, that was fast," she muttered. "But, what's this about giving Jake a break?" Naruto's grin widened into something almost wicked. "Let's just say I've been pranking him all week, got a little carried away." Marceline let out a long, exaggerated sigh, arms dropping to her sides. "Well, that's a bust. I was really looking forward to messing with those guys, haven't done squat all week." She flopped backward in the air, staring up at the moon like it personally wronged her. "It's been so boring I almost staked myself in the chest just for some excitement." Naruto snorted. "Tch, wish I was squat." "At least that'd be fun," she shot back without missing a beat. That cracked them both up, their laughter carrying into the open field until Marceline eventually circled back to her original point with another dramatic sigh. "Great, guess it's back to being bored again." Naruto rubbed at his chin, watching her hover lazily through the air. The idea bounced around his head for a second before he said it out loud. "Then why don't we hang out?" Marceline blinked, dropping her smirk for a rare flicker of surprise. Naruto just grinned wider. "I mean, I don't really feel tired anymore, not after running into you. And if we hang out, you won't be bored either." Marceline tilted her head, red eyes narrowing playfully. "You sure you can handle it, Blondie? I'm a lot of girl to keep up with." Naruto barked a laugh. "Handle it, please, I can handle anything. Just, if we're doing this, make it something close to fighting. I could use one." That earned him a fongy grin. Marceline floated upright again, mischief back in her eyes. "Oh, I've got the perfect place for that. It's a bit of a walk, though, which means I get to tell you just how mind-numbingly boring my week really was." Naruto chuckled, shoving his hands behind his head again. "Guess that's the price I pay. Lead the way, Vampire Queen." Marceline smirked, drifting forward across the grasslands, her boots just barely skimming the moonlit blades. Naruto followed close behind, cloak rippling with each step, their voices already spilling into the night as the trek began. The two immortals made their way out of the grasslands, cutting through the night as the world around them shifted with each step. Grass crunched beneath Naruto's sandals while Marceline drifted overhead, her figure lazy against the moonlight. When they came to a lake, Naruto ran across the water's surface, his reflection rippling beneath him, while Marceline hovered far above, gliding like she had all the time in the world. Where Naruto's stride cracked stone, hers barely stirred the air. All the while, she complained about her week. Naruto half listened at first, but the longer she droned, the more his ears tuned into everything else, the hidden screech from the trees, the ripples in the water like something lurking beneath, the low rumble of earth threatening to shift. Funny enough, it all matched her mood, unsettling. restless, waiting for something that never came. Not a single interruption to break her boredom. Naruto didn't really mind her talking, he could listen to her for hours, or at least watch her float around without a care. The real problem was his own brain, which kept drifting. He'd blank out so hard that he missed half her story, and worse, half her face. Which should have been a crime honestly, who made his head work like that? All or nothing zone out mode, he'd gladly watch without listening if it meant he didn't miss her expressions. Luckily, her rambling wound down just as they reached their destination. The ruins. It was exactly as she described, a dead city, its bones left behind after some ancient fall. Skyscrapers cracked and leaning, glass shattered into glittering teeth, streets split wide like scars. It reminded Naruto of the cities he once knew, just aged forward 1,000 years. It had the silence of a graveyard, not even a mouse stirred, not even the moonlight reached it properly. And it was like that for most of my week. Marceline finished at last, floating on her back with her hands folded over her chest like she was lounging in a coffin. You weren't kidding when you said it was boring, Naruto said with a chuckle, an understatement. His grin widened as he glanced around. So, why here? Doesn't seem like the kind of place to find a fight, feels pretty dead. Marceline rolled midair, propping her chin in her palm. Trust me, this place'll surprise you. It may seem dead, her smirk sharpened, but it's pretty lively in its own dead sort of way. Naruto raised a brow. Do I even want to know what that means, or would it ruin the surprise? I wouldn't say ruin, she said, her smile softening sheepish, but it's better if you see for yourself, explaining doesn't really do it justice. Naruto chuckled, you're lucky I like surprises. Otherwise I just bug you till you cracked. You could try, Marceline snorted, but I'd win in a battle of annoyance. I'm very good at getting under people's skin. Naruto tilted his head, grinned sly. Nah. Pretty sure nobody could get annoyed by a hot vampire, that'd just be bad manners. Marceline floated closer, smirk growing sharp. And I suppose letting me suck your blood would count as good manners? Only if it's as fun for you as it would be for me, Naruto shot back, stepping forward to close the gap. His grin matched hers. That, and you'd have to take me on a date first, no free bites. Now they were inches apart, locked in a silent contest of smirks. Neither flinched, the air stretched thin between them, until both cracked at once, laughter bursting out, their challenge breaking in perfect sync. It always seemed to end that way now, neither of them backing down, both breaking at the same time. We should really have a point system for this sort of thing, Naruto commented under his chuckle. Sure, Marceline agreed, laughter dying down. Is it like whoever makes the other person break first gains a point or something? Yep, Naruto answered with a nod, maybe we should even win something when we get to a certain amount of points. A brief silence settled between them. Naruto tilted his head, scanning the shadows and broken buildings of the ruins, the faint moonlight catching the cracks in the streets. For a moment, the playful energy hung in the air, replaced by curiosity. So, he finally said, breaking the quiet, how exactly did you find this place anyway? Marceline leaned back, letting space return between them. Her expression softened. Technically, I grew up here, a lot of memories from, thousands of years ago. Naruto whistled low, thousands, so do I still gotta pretend it's rude to ask your age, or are we past that now, 'cause if not, I don't think we've made any progress. That earned a genuine laugh from her, the sound he'd been angling for. He'd caught the flicker in her eyes, that not quite sad, not quite happy look. Memories were complicated. He knew what that felt like. Marceline let the silence linger a moment before shrugging. Yeah, it's still rude, especially when you're asking royalty like me. She grinned, raising her chin with exaggerated pride as though waiting for a bow. Naruto squinted at her and dipped into a sloppy, overdramatic bow, one arm across his chest. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, he said in a tone so mockingly formal it dragged a laugh out of her almost immediately. Dork, she shot back between chuckles, pushing off the air to float ahead of him as they entered deeper into the ruins. The laughter faded into the dark silence of the streets, where the hollow wind seemed to whistle through broken windows. Their footsteps, or in Marceline's case, Naruto's footsteps and her lazy drifting, echoed faintly. The stillness pressed in on them, so unnatural that both were too aware of it. "Man, this place is too quiet," Naruto muttered, shoving his hands behind his head. "Almost feels like it's daring us to fill it up with noise." Marceline arched a brow. "What, you wanna start yelling just to see if something bites?" "Nah," Naruto smirked. "If I yelled, you'd probably lose your ears before I got bored. I'll just talk your head off instead." Marceline rolled her eyes but didn't stop him, floating closer so she hovered alongside. "Fine, hit me with your weak then, bet it's way more entertaining than mine." Naruto's grin widened teasingly. "You sure? I don't want to make you jealous." "Just speak already, blondie," Marceline shot back, trying to hold back a small chuckle. "Alright then," Naruto started, "since I've been living with Finn and Jake." "Wait, you live with them," Marceline interrupted. Naruto deadpanned for a beat before his teasing smile returned. "Out of all the parts you could stop me at, you choose the beginning, how boring." "I mean, isn't that kind of important?" Marceline said, blinking, then quickly masked her surprise with a sly smile. "If not, continue." Naruto chuckled slightly, counting that as a point in the new point system they'd just made. She might not know it yet, but he was already 1-0. "Anyway," the red-eyed blonde continued, "I've been tagging along with Finn and Jake mostly, since I don't have my own place yet. Kinda feels like trying to do something myself when those two always find the funnest things to do." Marceline smirked. "Is funnest even a word?" Naruto paused, then grinned with full confidence. "Of course it is, now let me finish. We fought this huge slime monster that kept yelling about how it was the Goo King or something. Totally weak, but man, it wouldn't shut up even after we beat it. Jake had to stretch himself into a bucket just to scoop it all up." Marceline snorted, already picturing it. "We've done so much more than that in 1 week too," Naruto continued, bouncing on his heels as though reliving it. "We ran into tree witches, slayed dragons, saved a princess, I wrestled an ogre. Some wizards even tried to put curses on us, but they all backfired, heads as big as balloons. Comically huge fangs that immobilized you." He stretched his arms wide, laughing. Marceline chuckled, shaking her head. "Sounds fun." "Yeah, and I'm only just getting started," Naruto said, energy building. "Then today, Princess Bubblegum, if you've heard of her, decided she wanted to run a bunch of tests on me. Different from my usual training, but still challenging enough to be interesting." At that, Marceline's smirk faltered. "Figures," she muttered, eyes flicking toward a collapsed skyscraper in the distance. Naruto tilted his head. "Huh, what's that supposed to mean?" Marceline floated lower, arms crossed, voice casual but edged. "Nothing, just a thought." Naruto raised a brow but didn't press further. He recognized the tone, the kind that hinted at something complicated, scars hidden under the surface. He wondered if it had anything to do with Bubblegum. The shift in her demeanor when he mentioned the test made it obvious there was a story there. For now, he let it slide. He'd figure it out soon enough. After all, it was already too interesting to ignore. Marceline floated ahead, a small smile playing on her lips. "I think I finally found your fight," she said, as if ignoring the weight of their previous conversation. Naruto followed, matching her smile, moving with the same easy confidence. Whatever had been in the air before, it was gone now. Both of them had moved on. "So, have you done anything else with Finn and Jake?" Marceline asked, glancing back at him. "How's living with them going, not including the adventures and stuff?" "Going fine," Naruto replied, shrugging. "But I think I'm ready to either create or find my own place now." "Why's that?" she asked, floating lower to match his pace. "Not everyone can handle my lifestyle," Naruto said, smirking. "And I figure Jake deserves a proper break most mornings. At least enough so I can prank him like hell's on his heels." An evil laugh slipped out, soft but sharp, while his seemingly innocent grin carried a predatory glint behind it. He ran through possibilities in his head. He'd need a place to stay before he could fully pull this off. Marceline spoke again, teasing, "And how exactly do you plan on finding a place? you can't just plop a house down anywhere, someone's gonna have a problem with that. Did you forget everything I told you in our first meeting? Marceline rolled her eyes, but didn't answer. Anything coming out of your mouth is worth remembering, he said with a wink. Marceline rolled her eyes, but didn't say a word yet. But all I really needed was the knowledge of the rules, so I can break more of them. He let a beat pass, then added, I won't be conforming to anything, but you're right, I won't just live anywhere. Not without someone who can actually match me. Until then, I guess I'll keep crashing at Finn and Jake's. Before Marceline could reply, the air shifted. A subtle, viscous scent lingered beneath the bridge ahead, like something ancient and stagnant had been rotting for years. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he scanned the shadows below. What's that smell? He muttered, crouching slightly, letting his senses stretch out. Marceline hovered, her expression tightening just a fraction. You'll see soon enough, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. The darkness beneath the broken bridge began to move, slowly at first, like liquid settling in a pool. Shapes twisted and shifted, their forms barely holding together, and a strange green sheen reflected faintly in the moonlight. Naruto squinted. Intrigued, weird, what are those things? Marceline floated lower, arms crossed. Most people call them the oozers, not strong on their own, but they stick together, so numbers make them a little threatening. Naruto tilted his head, noting the masses of writhing, malformed creatures, their pale, featureless forms oozing slime from multiple holes where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. He didn't sense any chakra. When he first woke up, he'd pushed all the different energies he could feel aside to focus. Most living things didn't have chakra anymore, though some, like Finn or certain animals, still had faint traces. Other things had energy too, sometimes mixed with chakra. But the oozers, nothing. Which made sense, this city truly was dead. Naruto's thought sharpened into a grin. Then, without warning, he jumped. One moment he was beside Marceline, the next he was gone, swallowed by the writhing horde beneath the bridge. Her eyes widened. Wait. But by then, the boy was already tearing through them. Down in the chaos, it wasn't fighting, it was butchery. Naruto was a predator loosed in a field of feisty, mindless rabbits. The oozers clawed, slithered, and lunged with numbers on their side, but each strike they managed ended the same way, one solid punch and they crumpled like paper dolls, scattering into pools of green sludge. He didn't just hit them. He ripped them apart. Hands sliced through their bodies as though his fingers were blades, cutting them in half, or what he could only call taking their heads off, since they didn't really have heads. One kick caved through a chest like it was made of wet clay. Another lunge sent him spinning in midair, pouncing into the middle of a cluster, tearing them down like a whirlwind of claws, fists, and laughter. He laughed every step of the way, sharp, wild bursts of joy echoing louder than the oozers' gurgles. He wasn't trying to look cool. He wasn't even trying to win. This was just him having fun. Of course, it went without saying, this was fun, but it could have been better. They were too fragile, too easy. Man, one hit, Naruto muttered between punches, disappointment lacing his grin. That's boring. He was barely holding back, but still, dying in a single blow? Weak, even Finn, if Naruto went all out, wouldn't go down like this. Sure, most of Finn's body would probably be gone after the first strike, but he'd keep fighting to the bitter end. That was warrior spirit. He respected that, he liked seeing it in action this past week. Now if only he could find an army of Finns to go wild against. That would be a real slaughter fest, if only. Naruto finally turned, glancing back up toward the bridge, only to realize Marceline wasn't there. He frowned, then he noticed a small group of oozers slinking toward the shadows where he'd left her. His grin snapped back into place. In an instant, he bolted forward. The one furthest back didn't even notice before two hands plunged into its chest from behind and ripped outward, tearing it apart like rotten cloth. The next three fell in the same breath. His arms swung once, clean, and their bodies slid apart into three neat segments before collapsing into ooze. The second to last tried to flee. Naruto grabbed its leg, whipped it overhead, and slammed it down hard enough to splatter it across the stone. Goo hissed as it hit the ground, filtering between cracks. Finally, he pounced on the last one. His open hand drove straight through what might have been its head like a knife stabbing through butter. Then, grinning, he grabbed the inside and tore outward, tossing the twitching remains aside. And there she was. Marceline. Wide-eyed, hovering just beyond the mess. For a moment she wasn't looking at him, she was looking through him, locked in some memory he didn't know. A memory with the same haunted edge he knew too well from his own shinobi days. "You okay?" he asked, voice cutting through her trance. She blinked, the sound snapping her out of it. Yeah, of course, she tried to play it off, but he caught the crack in her tone. He smirked. "You froze." "I did not." "You totally did," Naruto teased, leaning in with a fox-like grin. "What, did I scare you? Didn't think the big bad vampire would get spooked." Marceline shot him a flat look, though her lips twitched. "I only froze, 'cause you jumped straight into a fight without even knowing what they could do." Naruto tilted his head, grinning wider. "And did they do anything?" She opened her mouth to snap back, but paused. Her eyes drifted over him, and her smirk faltered. "You're burned." Naruto blinked, looking down at his hands. They were scorched black in places, charred skin cracking, parts of his face blistered where droplets of ooze had struck him. His brow rose, he turned to glance back at the battlefield. The oozers he'd wrecked were still twitching, still crawling, not dead, not really. Their mangled forms were only immobilized, scattered pieces still wriggling. The last one, the one he'd thrown with all his strength, was gone completely, but only because the force had disintegrated it. And the slime spilling from their broken bodies, it sizzled when it hit the ground. The stone hissed and cracked beneath it, smoke curling upward like steam. Acid. Naruto listened closely, hearing the faint crackle of the earth burning under each drop. He flexed his hands, still smoldering. The acid hadn't just splattered, it had clung to him, eaten away until his body began knitting itself back together. His skin was already regenerating, smoothing back to its youthful, unscarred state. "Well," he muttered with a grin. "That's interesting. Maybe these things weren't as weak as he thought. Semi-immortal, maybe even regenerative. With enough numbers, they could keep a fight going for a long time. And their acid, yeah, that wasn't something to ignore." He hadn't even noticed his own charred state because of the rush he'd been having. Naruto turned back to Marceline, flexing his restored hand with a smile. "Why didn't you tell me these guys were this fun?" She chuckled softly, but the sound was weighed down by something else as she floated closer. Naruto didn't push, he knew it wasn't his business. But he could feel it, something about this place, about seeing him tear into the oozers like that, was stirring something in her. Something heavy. Maybe they should leave. Before he could voice it, Marceline moved past him, eyes fixed on the shadows ahead. "Come on, they usually gather like that when something's alive nearby. Probably something dead now, but worth checking." Naruto followed, smiling to himself. He'd keep going, but mostly to make sure she was okay. She was hiding scars, he could tell. And that old instinct tugged at him again, the one that always made him want to help carry someone else's weight. He sighed quietly. He'd need to keep himself grounded, not pry too deep. Not unless he could find a way to help without her noticing. Otherwise, how could he help at all? Naruto trailed behind Marceline, his footsteps a lazy echo beneath the ruined bridge. He tilted his head at her, brow raised. "You really think someone's down here?" Marceline just gave a shrug, arms crossed as she floated backward ahead of him. "Maybe, more likely a corpse. Not many people can handle those guys like you did." Their acid ooze is usually enough to make folks stay far away. Her mouth twisted, casual but with an edge. "Even I don't bother most of the time. They're not dangerous to me, just annoying." Naruto snorted, voice rough and amused. "Annoying sparring partners are half the fun." But mid-step, he stopped, his grin froze, head turning slightly as though his ears caught something sharp and unseen. The smirk stayed there for a breath longer, then faded as his gaze narrowed on the nearest support pillar. Marceline spun around, floating backward with her arms behind her head. She smirked, and you were teasing me about freezing up, look at you. Naruto flicked his eyes at her, lips twitching upward again, this is different. The humor didn't linger, his hand came up, palm brushing the cement of the massive pillar as he crouched down at its base. I think I just figured out what those things were swarming after. Marceline drifted closer, tilting her head down at him. What is it? Naruto closed his eyes, pressing his hand flat against the cracked stone. The sensation pulsed through him like a heartbeat, a signature he knew too well. If I'm right, he gave a quiet laugh, almost bitter. This city used to be New York. That made her blink, knew what? New York, it was a city, huge, thousands of years ago, he frowned, the weight of the words heavy on his tongue, guess that was before your time. Marceline crossed her arms, brow furrowed, I've been around for a while Naruto, but even before I became a vampire I've never heard of a place called that. Yeah, makes sense, his voice was low, distant. If the world's been flipped this long. Maybe I've been asleep 100,000 years. Long enough for a city like this to be erased, renamed, or forgotten. He pressed his hand harder against the pillar, knuckles whitening. Doesn't matter, I know what this is because, the chakra I'm sensing here is mine. She blinked, expression blank, chakra, the heck is that, some kind of snack food, 'cause it sounds like gum. Naruto almost snorted, shaking his head as though that amused him. Not even close, it's complicated, he straightened just enough to glance at her, lips quirking with that sly half-smile. Don't worry about it, just think of it as my kind of energy. Stuff nobody else in this world can use anymore. Before she could reply, Naruto dug his fingers into the concrete. With one brutal pull, the cement split like fragile plaster. He ripped deeper, stone and steel screeching under his grip, even the bridge above groaning at the sudden damage. Dust spilled around him as his arms sank further into the earth. And then he pulled something out. A small, sleek rectangle glinted in his hand, streaked with dust but unmistakably intact, an old iPhone 15. Naruto stared at it, thumb brushing over its scratched screen, his face caught somewhere between nostalgia and disbelief. Marceline floated down to get a better look, brow quirked, what is that? He let out a half-laugh, shaking his head, a phone, from before I went under, way older than anything you guys have now. Her brow arched, phones don't look like that, at least not in most kingdoms. Big, clunky things, not all sleek with a screen like that. Mine's different, but still, that thing looks like it came out of a sci-fi flick. Naruto raised an eyebrow, muttering to himself. So iPhones didn't survive, huh, but older, clunkier stuff did, his lips pulled flat in a deadpan. Don't tell me the Nokia outlasted us all. That only made Naruto think of this time as a post-apocalyptic world, only signs of the past, like these ruins, but other than those few clues everything else seemed like further in the past than it was supposed to. Wizards, dragons, princesses, was weird, still didn't find any to disprove that. The what now? Marceline asked, breaking Naruto out of his thoughts. Never mind, he slipped the phone into his pocket with a sigh. She leaned in, curious, so why'd you bury a phone under a bridge, like some weird time capsule? Naruto stood, brushing cement dust from his hands. His expression was oddly calm now, almost reverent. Some things from my past mattered enough that I didn't want to lose them. I sealed them in chakra, buried them across the world. Each one significant. And I scattered them like a scavenger hunt. Each signature is large, so I only know the area location the thing is in, maybe as large as a city, and since the world has changed so much I won't be able to use my memory of where I buried them, no cheating. His eyes drifted back to the ruined pillar, guess I got lucky with this one, those oozers masked the signature so well I didn't even notice until now. Marceline tilted her head, studying him with something unreadable in her red eyes. He shoved his hands into his pockets and stretched his shoulders back. Anyway, that's enough for today, we should head home, I've got sleep to catch up on. At that, Marceline perked up, her lips curling into a sly grin. Wait, earlier you said you were looking for your own place, but you needed someone who could match you, right, match what exactly? Naruto chuckled under his breath. When I say match, I mean strong enough, chill enough, and fun to be around. Her grin widened as she floated a little closer, tilting her head at him. Well then, you can crash with me. I've got some free space, 2 birds, 1 stone. Naruto raised a brow. What, you got a problem you just dealt with? Marceline shook her head, hair swaying behind her. Nope, you're the one killing your own birds. You don't want to mooch off Finn and Jake anymore, and you also need a roommate. I'm just being considerate since, you know, you only woke up a week ago, Sleeping Beauty. Naruto's smirk sharpened. You think you can handle me? She rolled her eyes and gave him a playful shove in midair. Don't start throwing my own words back at me, doofus. They batted a few more teasing remarks back and forth, the edge of the earlier heaviness dulled by their banter. Eventually, Marceline drifted upward, stretching lazily in the air. All right, I'm out, try not to pick fights with any more ooze freaks without me. Naruto waved her off with a grin. Yeah, I'll catch up. When her silhouette finally vanished into the darkness above, the grin slipped from his face. He pulled the iPhone back out, thumb pressing the screen. Nothing, dead and unresponsive. His scowl was sharp, jaw tightening, but then, after a breath, the smirk returned. He shoved the phone into his pocket and turned his gaze straight ahead, straight at the invisible camera, as if aware of being watched. His eyes glinted mischievously, voice unspoken but loud in his look. And then, without a sound, he bent his knees and leapt away into the shadows. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can, and maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, All Kage, out.